Yo, what's good, YouTube? What's good? It's Stormy B-Man, and I am back. Welcome to another edition of Kung Fu Film Focus. That's right, and today we are featuring a classic from 1971, The Chase, aka Shanghai Killers. It's a very crude film, a film that a lot of people may not even remember. It was rather on the ultimate low budget side. And it was a film that kicked in at the very, very beginning of the martial arts film craze in the U.S. The hokey leaps, the wire effects that were so cheap, the tons of blood that was featured in these films from the early 70s, all seen right here. The wonderful thing about these films were, if you caught them when their initial run in America, they always brought something that you had never seen before. And this film featured sword play, hand-to-hand combat, love, and blood. Shanghai Killers, as it was known in parts of the world, including the U.S., also the film was known as Slash, the Blade of Death. This film came out 1971 in Hong Kong and made its way to America by the end of late 72. It played in theaters, grindhouses, drive-ins across the U.S., and it developed a cult following. The film starred James Tien, who could be remembered for playing the cousin of Bruce Lee in The Big Boss. He played one of the villains in Jackie Chan's Dragon Fist, and he was also in Jackie Chan's Dragons Forever, which I reviewed recently. He was in the very opening of that film, a little pudgy and older at that time, because it was 1981, and he wore dark shades. He played the Hong Kong gangster who got taken out at the beginning of the film in Dragons Forever. The film also starred Maria Yi, who was also in The Big Boss with James Tien. And to round out that cast, which was a very small cast, you had Fong Sam, a young lady who played a villainous role here, and Tong Ting, who was the main villain. The name that they called him in the film was Hong Yi Chu. It mentioned his name many, many times. It's like you could never forget the name because they called his name out all the time. A little known tidbit about this film. The action was directed by Chen Kuai-tai. Chen Kuai-tai would go on to become a Shaw Brothers main stable star. And early on, because he was an actual martial artist in real life, they hired him to be the action director for this film. This was one of the ways that Chen Kuai-tai made his living making these films like this, very low budget, and he action choreographed a lot of those Hong Kong films early on. There are 3 main actors in the film outside of James Tien, and I mentioned them. And he plays the hero who is carrying what is called the bloody sword. The bloody sword, it was legend to have a twin. And the bloody sword that he has, it has an enchantment on it. When you draw it, you're able to wield it with extreme precision and speed. When he draws the sword in this film, it's interesting the special effect that they use, because I was trying to figure out if they speeded the camera up, if he moved actually really, really slow, and then they ran it back at normal speed where it would look like it was really fast. I don't know, and still to this day I haven't figured out how they made James Tien so fast with that sword. It was almost like a gunman in the Old West, where he drew the sword and just sliced his opponents very fast and put it back in its sheath, where you never even saw him hardly use it because he was so fast with it. This film was directed by Wong Ten Lam, who would go on in later years and become a triad gangster on screen in several different roles. But back in the early 70s, Wong made small, low-budget films for Hong Kong film companies. Golden Harvest is the company that produced this film. And James Tien, who was touted by Golden Harvest early on to be their studio lead, was actually pushed aside once Bruce Lee achieved his success in his first 2 films, The Big Boss and Fist of Fury in Hong Kong. And James Tien was regulated from that point to be a co-star. I don't think that James Tien was very fond of Bruce Lee, even though he played in a couple of films with him. But as the years went on, he was one of those guys that wouldn't even give an interview talking about him. So it was really interesting to see that. As we talk about this film, Shanghai Killers, aka The Chase, is a film where a number of, I guess you could say hired. They are hired swordsmen. I was thinking like lone gunmen, but like hired swordsmen were looking for James Tien's character because he was setting out to avenge his father's death. And he knew only that it involved the Golden Gate sect. And that was the group headed up by Hong Yi-chu, played by Tongcheng. And as he was on his quest to find this group, they were like a band of bullies and bandits. Everyone wanted his sword. Everyone was vying for his sword because they could tell by the case that he carried it in, it was the famous blood sword that had legendary background, and the sword also had a twin. And so people actually made offers to him to buy it, and they tried to steal it from him. There were a number of circumstances throughout the film where they were trying to separate him from the famous blood sword. James Tien's character initially runs into a group of bandits who want to buy the sword from him, and when he doesn't want to sell it, they try to take it from him forcibly. And that's when we get to see the magic of the sword. As soon as he unsheaths it, his blade works so quickly and mows people down, and it goes right back into the sheath, the hilt. You marvel at his expertise. But his expertise is due to the enchantment of the sword. It's not his ability. But he's a decent fighter. So as he goes out there and he tries to apprehend the people that were responsible for his dad's death, he comes across a woman played by Fong Sam. Now Fong Sam's character, she is really the key to the whole story. She's a seductress, and she wants the sword for her own reasons, but she's also the woman of Hong Yi-chu. Okay, the plot thickens, right? Yeah. So her being that way with him, she knew about the legend of the sword because Hong Yi-chu had coerced her to help him try to get the sword from Shanghai Long, who was played by James Tien. The thing about it is that with everyone vying for the sword, nobody really realized that the second sword may be in the possession of someone who is around town. And that is carried by Maria Yi. Maria Yi's character, she has the sword that is the twin. And it turns out that secretly, she doesn't know it yet, nor the Shanghai Long know that they're cousins. And it was their dads who had fought in a blood battle to see who was the best or superior swordsman. But they were cousins not by blood nature. It was like cousins by camaraderie. And they fought to a battle where they were both deeply wounded, but it was Hong Yi-chu who came along and murdered them both. And he was only able to acquire one of the swords, but he lost the sword. And it turned up in Maria Yi's possession. So with Shanghai Long trying to hunt down Hong Yi-chu, the battle for the blood swords took place. This film has a lot of hokey special effects and a number of failed wire attempts as you watch the movie. It was amazing to see that they left a lot of the bad shots in the final version of the film, which was really interesting back then because they wouldn't normally do stuff like that. But in this film, I guess the budget was so low, they didn't have a lot of film to do corrections. So they would only leave out what was really horrible. And if they judged it on that merit, what they left in the film was kind of horrible too. There are scenes where guys are flying around on wires and they're kind of dipping in the wires like they were about to be dropped and stuff like that. You can imagine people really got hurt making these films because the effects were so hokey and so cheap. They probably didn't have enough to get people proper hospitalization or something if accidents happen on set. So a lot of stuff was left in the can, so to speak, meaning left in the film. Shanghai Killers was also noted for its play on a Western where you had this man, James Tien, searching for what he was searching for, and that was the killers of his dad. And Maria Yi, this story mirrored a lot of what you would see in the Westerns back in the late 60s and early 70s. Films like One-Eyed Jacks, that kind of took from that. And that's where you could see a number of these things taking place during their storylines and plots. James Tien's character seemingly doesn't want to fight a lot in the film. He's only looking to take revenge, but he's always forced into a situation. Those are the best kind of films, right? When they always force the guy who doesn't want to fight, get your ass out there and fight. As I see some people in the chat there, see we got Nassim the Dream is out there. Thomas Moreland is out there. D. Hodges and Derek McGee. Let's see who we got. No, that's not right. Let's see. I don't know how many of you out there are really into these type of films, but because this film was it's one of the places that I had put, you know, I took that early clip that I played. I got it off of YouTube and I put it out there. But I just wanted, you know, someone to get a feel for the hokiness of this film. I also have still photographs that I'm sharing. But that opening little clip that I played, opening to the show, but it's not an opening of the film, it shows the real hokiness of this film and how terribly low budget. And if you see the film grain, it's like it's badly faded, very little color, and the background and everything is very cheap and dingy. But that was what was great about these old movies too, because when you would watch them, you could just see that they were just rushing from one shot to the next, you know. And Chen Kwai Tai, his choreography, though it wasn't bad, it was like terribly performed. Like I said, the film was very cheap, so they didn't have enough time to do proper retakes in case someone didn't do it properly, didn't execute a move or whatever the correct way. Instead of going about it and reshooting or, you know, doing a retake, they would just kind of be like, oh, that's good enough. Let's move on to the next scene. So they did that a lot for this film and for a number of films like this film at that particular time. Shanghai Killers also gave us a lot of sword play from Golden Harvest Studios, who were not famous for sword play. They were trying to enter the kung fu film market with films that would show hand-to-hand combat, mostly kung fu, but they were trying their hand with sword play. And as opposed to what was being done by Shaw Brothers, Golden Harvest was way behind. They didn't have the money to make it look as good as the Shaws were looking at that time. And even though Shaws did what they did, they were the cream of the Orient, but they were still behind the U.S. and international as far as the quality of their films. But they were head and shoulders above what Golden Harvest was doing at the time, and this was 1971, prior to Bruce Lee. Bruce Lee helped put Golden Harvest on the map at the end of the day. There's no way around that. It's just something that transpired, and it's a part of history. We've got Joseph Brown has joined us. He says salute, and he's saluting Gil Coles. What's going on with you, Joseph Brown? Yes, sir. Stormy B-Man has got a kung fu film focus going this afternoon. I was off from work, so I was able to do something today with this. This is not going to be a regular thing. It's just for today. I was able to get out here and put something out. You know, as you look at this image that I just put up on the screen at the moment, it is a photo still shot from the film Lobby Card. It shows James Tien and Maria Yi. These two were contracted with Golden Harvest Studios in 1970 to launch the studio, which Raymond Chow formed after leaving the Shaw Brothers. Raymond Chow bought the old Cathay Studios, which was a textile mill originally and everything, and he turned it into a film studio where he would make low-budget films, and he tried to give the audiences what they liked at the time, which were romance films and action films. The action films consisted of sword play and kung fu martial arts. And they did this to the best of their ability at the time. The studio sought the best talent that they could freelance. And at the time, Maria Yi and James Tien both had opportunities at other things originally. Tien was with the Shaw Brothers, and he was always like a stunt man in the background. You could see him in some old late 60s and early 70s features. But he stood no chance of being a leading man at Shaw Brothers Studios when they had gentlemen like Jimmy Wong Yu, later David Chang, and Tai Lung. those men, he would have to wait in the background behind them. So he took the opportunity with Golden Harvest to become a leading contracted player with them. One of the interesting aspects of Hong Kong filmdom back then was a star's movie contract where they were contracted to 7-year deals, and they shared no opportunity to have a say-so in the films that they starred in as far as creative aspects, and then they were contracted to flat salaries. So whatever the base salary was, that's what you got. You could possibly receive a bonus from the studio heads, but basically the money was very firm where you were contracted. And the producers raked in all of the rewards and proceeds. Joseph Brown says, facts. Bruce got a lot of pushback from Golden Harvest. Him and producer had creative differences, but eventually Bruce won out. Yeah, and Bruce's demands were not overwhelmingly unfair or anything, Joseph Brown. Bruce wanted quality. And that's why, even though his films that were made under Golden Harvest, if you notice the production values on the 3 films that he did with Golden Harvest, The Big Boss, Fist of Fury, and Way of the Dragon, which was a co-production between his newly formed company Concord and Golden Harvest. If you look at the production values, his films always look better. The set designs were better. The film cuts, the way something was panned or scanned or whatever, all of that looked much better than the other films that Golden Harvest churned out. Now, what was interesting was that nobody would really take that lead and do that for the other productions when they saw the successes that he was having. It was really a great statement that you made there, Joseph Brown, that Bruce received a lot of pushback because they didn't want to change. They wanted to remain cheap and mired in mediocrity, whereas Bruce was trying to bring the quality level up. I mean, he understood it was nowhere near what America did, right? But at the same time, even Shaw Brothers, Bruce felt like was sub-quality stuff. So it wasn't like he was just crapping on Golden Harvest for what they were doing. He wanted to raise the overall, and he felt like his input from something simple like a fight scene. Why does everyone fight the same way all the time? And they fight for 15 minutes when you got to fight another fight scene somewhere in the middle of the film. And then at the end of the film, when you take on the big boss, he's like, why are you fighting these long drawn out fight scenes where the audiences just get fatigued and nothing is fresh? So it was his inventiveness and approach to choreography where you fought in increments, but if you were fighting like the lackeys of a boss, you take them out pretty easy. When you fight the boss number 1 man, you might face him for 2 minutes or 3 minutes. Then when you fight the boss, 5 minutes. You know what I'm saying? So, but they had 20-minute fight scenes and 12-minute fight scenes and 15-minute fight scenes with everything all meshed together. And it was Bruce's approach that, hey, we need to modify this. We need to tweak this so that the audience can have a chance to catch a breather and also understand what they're seeing. You can actually tell a story with the action, Bruce related. And they were like looking at him like he was crazy. But this film in particular, it shows the crudeness because it was a Golden Harvest production that Bruce, it was before they contracted him, right? And it was before he did anything with them. And you could just see where the values were so less in the total production overall. I mean, that scene that I showed early when the show was opening in that clip where the guy took the door and threw it at the guy, and it was on a string or a wire or something, and you could see it like floating up and down as it's sailing toward him. It was like, dude, it was supposed to just fly on a straight arc, right? But it was like so cheap and crude, it was like shaking like it was about to fall, and it probably did fall, and they couldn't get a take together better than the one that they included in the film. Or just waited till they got that take and said, okay, that's good, you know. But it's that type of attention to detail that made Lee much different when he approached his films. And he was just an actor, but he could look around him and see that the people didn't care. And he was like, man, you guys got to get this crap together. He was like, look, you get up and do this. You get over there and hold that. He was actually directing, choreographing, and producing behind the scenes as well as in front of the camera during his whole time when he was on a production. And it raised the quality for his movies more than the others. That's why he would have been a better director if he had lived and he could go into directing. He probably would have made some great films in the future because his idealism was to overall raise the quality that they had over there. Trick Noty has joined us. He says, Stormy B, man, how you doing? I just got in here. How you doing? And Drew Titan is out there. What's good with you, Drew? Bronx on deck. Yes, sir. We're talking about Shanghai Killers today, bro. A film from 1971 that was a swordplay epic produced by Golden Harvest Studios. And it starred James Tien and Maria Yi, who's pictured on the screen right at the moment presently. Shanghai Killers was not a #1 box office hit by the least or whatever, but it was an interesting film. This particular photo that you see right here features Fong Sam, the female, who was the femme fatale, and also the leading bad guy's girlfriend. She was trying to put the moves on James Tien's character here, where she's trying to seduce him, you know, and get the sword away from him, the famous bloody sword. But the interesting thing about her character, man, she was so devious. She killed an old guy and blamed it on something else, and then she betrayed Han Yi-Chu, who was her boyfriend and everything. But she really wanted James Tien's character, so she was like, you know, I killed him because I wanted to be your woman. You know, she tells him in the film. It's kind of funny, man. It's one of those things that when you see it play out on screen, that she was like really something else, her character. And just overall, you know, her performance in there is kind of amazing. I'm surprised that she didn't get more of those type of roles or even bigger roles in her career working with Golden Harvest. But in this film, I liked her character. I thought she was cool. Tongcheng, who is the leading bad guy, he's noted for a number of films during the 60s. He was in a lot of the action films from also Shaw Brothers Studio, where they would have dance routines and kind of like cop dramas and thrillers like that, spy films. You know, and he played in some of the kung fu films in the early 70s. He was not a martial artist at all, but he was the type of guy that, you know, he had a little bit of charisma and he had a little bit of a cult following at the box office. So they would keep him in these films. Very interesting man, Tongcheng. Tongcheng is a guy, I'll put his photo up here on the screen again so you can see him. That's Tongcheng there. And like I said, he played in a number of films. He's actually in a film called The Big Fight, another film from like 1970 that ironically features James Tien. I'm sorry, not James Tien. That features Chen Kwa-tai, and who's the choreographer for this film. And he plays a villain in that film. He's one of the bad guys, Japanese, that come to town, come to a village, beating up on the Chinese. And Tong Ting plays a co-starring role in that film, the bloody fight. Um, he was a guy, like I said, during that era, you saw his face a lot in Hong Kong films. And when Hong Kong started turning toward the action film genre, which was basically kung fu and sword films, they found ways to put him in the films. And he was no martial artist in real life at all. Yeah, Shanghai Killers, again, the third act of the film sees James Tien trying to get his sword back after it was stolen from him. And once he does, he takes on the bad guys. But again, that special effect about him drawing the sword out and then slashing through numerous villains and opponents, you get a chance to see him really. He looked like a supreme swordsman, but it wasn't so much that he was supreme. It was just that sword, like I said, it had an enchantment on it. And once paired with the sister sword or the brother sword, the twin, when you unleash both swords would automatically go toward one another. And that, ironically, is how they end up killing the villain at the end. When both swords get unsheathed, they just fly out of the holder's hands and into the bad guy. This was a film that for a long time was never available on DVD and even more scarce on VHS, though I found a copy of it in the late 70s, early 80s from a video store here in Chicago that specialized in martial art films. It was a video store called 79th Street Video here in Chicago. And I was able to get my hands on a copy of Shanghai Killers. I actually still have that VHS tape today. And it's the quality of the film is quite murky. But it wasn't much different from how the film appeared in the movie theaters as well as the drive-ins when it was originally released in the U.S. I would love to see a remastered version of this, but it would really make the film look even worse because of the hokiness of the wire effects and special effects that are in the films. It is probably best that it be left like this because with the way that Blu-ray and 4K and all of that has brought things out, you could really see all of the mistakes, the wires, and all of that. So it would make a difference tremendously if they decided to upgrade that movie and present it in a better remastered quality. That would be something to see. Let's see, we got Joseph Brown's laughing there. Trick Note, he says, Stormy B Man, I know you are not talking about the Venom mob, but is it just me or did Lo Mang, aka the Toad, always died in just about every movie he starred in? You're right, Trick Note. I'm not talking about the Venom mob right now. I'm talking about the Shanghai Killers. So, if you want to wait until Stormy B Man go ahead and cover, the Venoms and the Shaw Brothers films, which I will be doing. I would love to talk about that, but I'm talking about Shanghai Killers right now, and it's a very low budget film. It's a classic. It's a film that people like yourself probably never saw, which you ought to go and check it out because you might find out, man, this is really hokey, but I like it. Huh? The Venoms, everybody know who the Venoms are, huh? And they more recent, But think about it, like why I'm doing this. I'm doing this because I'm trying to present some material to people that they may not have had a chance to see and enjoy yet. Not only that, but it's a part of the history of the genre. You know what I'm saying? So that's why I'm presenting this. I will be getting to the Shaw Brothers. I will be presenting some of their films. I just recently did Five Fingers of Death, which was the first one that I was ever introduced to. But the Shaws have over 800 or 900 films in their library that could be covered. And I don't think Stormy B Man will be along be around long enough to cover all of those. So I'm trying to get some of these little low budget films in before I jump on that streak, because it's hard to start talking about those high quality things and then go back to the low quality when you can incorporate the low quality first to bring people along, because that's how it started out. The films that were so meager early on, and they got better and better and better as the years subsequently went along. Just like this morning, I had a chance to sit down and revisit watching Hero, Jet Li's film. A great martial art film that I would like to do a review about very soon. And it trumps a lot of other films, even Shaw Brothers films. But that's for another day. You know what I mean? So I'm just trying to bring notoriety to these films because they are a part of the genre and they were strong during that time. Even though people saw the poor leaps and trampoline effects and wire effects, this was something that captivated audiences during that time because they hadn't seen anything like that. Guys doing 20-foot leaps on top of buildings and rooftops, jumping up over each other 20 feet in the air, you know, fighting in the air with swords and stuff like that, flying through the air towards one another with swords. We didn't see any of that stuff here in the U.S. before this time, 1970, 1971. All we knew was the man with no name, the Western. You know what I mean? Pulling his guns out and shooting at people and stuff like that. So this was a different type of physical activity and action. And audiences ate it up. It was still quite different from the samurai films of Zatoichi and the Blind Swordsman or what's his name? The Baby Cart series with Ogami Ito. You know? Sanjuro, the samurai. Those films were all Japanese films. And when they had their fight scenes, they lasted like 2 minutes because the guy would whip out the sword and slice guys and that'll be it. He might clash swords with another guy for like 2-3 seconds and slice him and that would be it. So kung fu films and swordplay films from Hong Kong, they focused more on technique, stylistic display of the art, and overemphasizing on the kill. Meaning like once they got an opponent and got him broke down or whatever, it took him a moment to die. You know what I mean? These were like comic book heroes of today back then. You know, superheroes flying through the air and stuff like that. Very hokey stuff, but at the same time, we hadn't seen anything like that in the U.S. And I can't stress that enough when you talk about what you had not seen before. Because if I could just take you through a time capsule, everything that you know today somehow, some way came after everything that we're talking about. So it's like it's hard for you to envision that. But I grew up in the era when it was introduced. So it's like it means so much more to me. And that's why I take that time out to share it with you all, because there's no way around it. There's no way of getting to explain that any better. It's like to understand that these things did not take place prior to what you know of presently. That's just, you have to try to understand that. You know? Even when you talk about films like what the Shaws did later with the Venoms, do you realize that the Venoms came in the late 70s, but they were around as early as the mid 70s. They played stuntmen and they did the stunt and acrobatic acts for the other actors in films. And then the director decided, hey, what if we focused on these guys and their attributes, what they're capable of doing? And that's how they were born. They were born in a new wave of presenting action through acrobatics, through athleticism, where they were the primary focus and they were the stars. That's what came and brought them to fruition, the Venoms. So there is a rich history there, and I'm trying to take us through that, but I'm trying to go at a slower pace because I don't want to skip anything. I want all things included here when we talk these films, because once we do that, for those who haven't had an opportunity to gain their initiation to it, they could take a trip down the lane and take a look at what they like, what was interesting to them or whatever, but I want to present it all like an open book. So don't take offense to what I'm saying. I'm explaining at the same time through the whole process why Kung Fu Film Focus is going in the direction that it is. Because it's important that if you didn't know anything about them, I'm also here to help and share, to fill in the gaps. What you didn't know, what you'd like to know, what you were interested or had queries about or whatever, that process. And we can't rush through that. We can't rush through it. A film like Shanghai Killers would never measure up to something that the Shaw Brothers did, you know, film classic and sword classics like, you know, films that come through their pipeline. But it still existed. You know what I mean? It was a car in the race. It may not have finished first. It finished, but it might have brought up the rear. You know what I mean? So that's all that is about that, you know. But again, and for those that are listening out there in the chat, it's like if you had questions, Stormy B Man can answer them. You know what I mean? You want to ask questions about this film, I could tell you or whatever, but I'm just trying to present it because this is one of those, again, you had to be around at that time. This probably played with the film like Abby or It's Alive or something like that. You know what I mean? And it could have even been with a blaxploitation film. But a film like this would play and you just sit there and you laugh. Some people took these kind of films as comedies because the action was so over the top. You know, you see a guy riding on a horse and then he jumps off the horse and does a triple somersault in the air and lands on his feet and then pulls his sword out and starts fighting some guys and stuff like that. You're like, man, what the hell is this? You know, it's not humanly possible to do what he did. But that's what Kung Fu films were about. You know, Kung Fu and martial arts on display, the weaponry, the expertise behind the movements. All of that was done because these men over there had talent and had ability, and they found a way to be entertaining with it. And not only was that entertainment a part of the movie process, but it was a part of their culture. They had traveling opera troupes who would perform these shows in various towns and villages and provinces throughout the mainland country. Okay. And they were paid, you know, very meager prices to perform their arts, but people took it with respect in their culture. If you were an acrobat or something like that, you were respected for the skill that you brought forward. And a lot of people in the U.S. would not understand that. But the only thing that I could say is that would be on par is how we treat our professional athletes. Okay. For a guy to hit a baseball or run a football down a field or to dribble a basketball. This was their people who did this, and they just found a way to put it on film, because back then when they did those travelings through various towns and provinces and whatnot, you know, there were people who didn't have that. There wasn't a theater to go to at one time or whatever. So when they would come to town, like the circus, people would pay for the entertainment. Just as the Harlem Globetrotters would go through different areas and put on their show and perform, people would come out and pay to see that. Quite similar thing here. That's what it is, and that's what it's all about. But yeah, that's, we're talking about Shanghai Killers, a film that was from 1971, starring James Tien and Maria Yi. And it was one of Golden Harvest's original releases. Okay? A very crude film that told the story of revenge and gave us entertainment. Gave us a lot of entertainment. So, this, it is what it is. But I'll tell you, for each and every Kung Fu film that I've seen, and I can tell you I've seen a few hundred of them. I haven't seen them all. I would never try to lie and over-exaggerate. But I have seen, over my lifetime, I've seen a couple hundred, Kung Fu films easily. Okay? And there's quite a few that I haven't seen that I'm aware of because of who starred in them and things like that. But to just take the moment out and to talk to you brothers and sisters about these films and revisit them or whatever, because guess what? There was nothing out there like that. There was nothing out there that holds your interest and have you to talk about or share or revisit something from an era gone by. There was a time when there would be lines around the damn corner. I mean, this is what I'm saying about you people out here listening to this review. There would be lines around the corner for people wanting to watch these movies, man. And we're talking all ages, but they started primarily with the kids, from the ages of 6 years old on up to late teens, huh? We packed the movie houses. We sit there all day and watch the movies 2-3 times. Go back next Sunday if one was still playing and see it again. You know what I mean? It was just that kind of thing back then. We didn't have the internet, okay? We didn't have multiplexes. We had a couple of movie houses that would show, if you were lucky, one of the movie houses would show 3 movies. If you were in another area, you might see 2, But it was a different time. And Kung Fu movies across the U.S. made millions. I don't know what the producers in Hong Kong and Taiwan and Japan and everything did with that money that they made from these films, but when they imported them, but they made a lot of money. And these people actually took the time out to dub these films in English so that they could be even more entertaining. Sometimes the dubs had nothing to do with what was really being said in the film. But most times they tried to find a way to express exactly what was being said on film so it could, complete the story. But oftentimes you get a funny line of dialogue, where it would be, funny. It's like, you found a way to say that, I remember watching a film that I may review in the near future, Fist of the Double K. And they had some bad guys in there. And one of the bad guys had a southern black guy accent. Hold on a minute. Let me tell you something. This is my man, Pigtail Lane. That's how he talked, man. I was like, why they get the dude to dub that? And you see it's a Chinese dude, right? Man, I'm telling you, man. But that was what was so great, the dubbing, the mouth moving and the voice has stopped already and is still talking. Come on, man. That was classic stuff. But we watched that and we ate it up, man. We didn't get mad. We loved it. All I'm saying is take time out, check these films out. you will find out that there is something out there that you like, you know. And there are categories. I might do a kung fu film focus on the categories that are within the genre itself, because the genre of kung fu has subgenres, subcategories, where you could actually take comedies, scary films, romantic films, all of those, you know, different types. There are some that are like focuses on the styles of the kung fu, some that the animal styles that kung fu mimics. Okay, Shaolin. Okay, the monks. Okay, Wu-Tang. All of those different categories. Shaolin and Wu-Tang became two categories that meshed and fought each other and things like that on screen. So there are various subgenres in the genres, and that's another aspect of kung fu films that's excellent. And to talk about that alone, I would love to get a panel of brothers on here with me and talk about that, because the genres, people like what they like. You know, I like the old traditional kung fu film where it might be a school against another school, you know, or they call them bashers, you know, where the guys got to fight the Japanese or whatever, you know, that those films, I love those films, the revenge films. A guy got to go and learn a new style and train for a certain period of time and come back and defeat the bad guy, you know, or when it takes a couple of guys to team up and take down a bad guy. Those are the kind of films like Wong Ching Lee starred in, you know, from Korea, and he was always facing off against 2 or 3 guys that were really good, you know, and they had to take him on because he was so good by himself that they couldn't beat him one man on one man. So, but yeah, that's what it's all about, man. Shanghai Killers was a really low budget film from the early 70s. Very entertaining, though. There's some funny lines of dialogue in this film. And the action was pretty good, too, for the time that it was made. It was just cheap effects, you know, cheap stuff. That sword played by James Tien, I don't think he ever looked any cooler than he looked in this film, you know. When he pulled that sword out and he just and sliced people up, it was so awesome, you know. I don't think he ever looked better than he did in this film, but as far as using a weapon, you know. But the choreography by Chen Quan-tai, who later went on to be Shaw Brothers guy, you know. In the Shaw Brothers film, he's famous for Man of Iron, where he played, you know, or the boxer from Shang Tsung, which is a great film that I could do a review on. Maybe I'll do that as my next Shaw Brothers film, because the boxer from Shang Tsung, a couple of years ago, they brought it out and remastered on Blu-ray, and boy, does it look great. Glad to have it in my collection. I have the original DVD and the VHS, and the Blu-ray is outstanding. Makes it look like it's a brand new movie of today. So, you know, that may be one that I focus on coming out. So, but yeah, I just wanted to come out here and talk to you brothers and sisters about this little gem. It's a part of my collection. I feel like it's a classic. You don't have to feel that way. But Stormy B, man, love him some Kung Fu films. And, you know, that's what I got to say about it. You know, you don't have to love them like I do, but respect the technique. You understand? So that's about all I got for you guys today on this one. You can come back to the channel a little later this evening. We got the 3 Wise Men of Boxing coming up, and we're talking about intimidating fighters in boxing. So, in boxing, you know. So that's all I got for you guys. Thank you for tuning in. I want to say peace to everybody. Stay safe. Still take care of yourself out there. This is Stormy B, man, and I'm checking out. Till the next time we see each other, I want to say peace. And go watch some of these Kung Fu films. Go check this one out, Shanghai Killers.